Someone much smarter than me said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. We strongly encourage you to plan every lesson whilst you're on break and have your supervising teacher check them. Lesson planning for science lessons is a little different, so we've compiled this clip to help you. Your early lesson plans will be quite long and detailed, but as you progress in your practicum, you'll find you need to put in less detail over time. Let's look at the elements of a lesson plan. A good lesson plan will answer the 5 W's: who, when, where, what and how. We've provided you with a template, but by all means feel free to find and or create your own version. Real-world lesson plans are a personal document, so the usual conventions that apply to formal writing do not apply. So go ahead, use abbreviations, colour code and write in point form. If this is for an assessment piece for another course, just be sure to check with your course convener the level of detail required, as this will vary from course to course. A good lesson plan structure will have 3 main parts: the lesson description, lesson sequence and the lesson debrief. I'll describe each in turn. The lesson description is the portion which describes the various administrative aspects of the lesson. Where will it be? What is the lesson about? What are the learning objectives? What resources will you use? How does it link to the Australian curriculum science? What are the various safety considerations? This last aspect is particularly important for science lessons, so refer to the resources for conducting a risk assessment. For this task, we were required to title your lesson plan as your group's question. Firstly, this focuses your attention on the intended goal for the lesson, and also it allows you to check alignment between your stated goal, the lesson title, the content descriptors and your learning objectives. While the content descriptors from the Australian Curriculum Science are quite broad and general in scope, a learning objective is much more specific and focused for the lesson. The learning objectives over the course of a unit should allow adequate coverage of the content descriptor or descriptors. State your learning objective with one of Bloom's verbs and finish with a content item. So for example, classify objects according to the 4 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas and plasma. Being specific and listing the states of matter is a good idea. As a quick reminder, when you begin planning a lesson, jot down objectives as you go through and plan the lesson. Once you've finished, review the list and reduce and or modify so you're targeting 2 or 3 objectives per lesson. You have good learning objectives if it smirks. They should be simple, succinct, short and sharp. They should be measurable. Students produce a product to demonstrate their learning. They need to be realistic, so consider the allotted time and age and abilities of your students. They should be in kids speak, so keep the language simple so that they too know your goals. The next segment is the lesson sequence. In this course, we will require to plan according to the 5 E's inquiry model developed by the team led by Roger Bybee in the Biological Sciences Curriculum Study. So refer to the relevant workshop activities and resources to ensure you have a good understanding of how to plan each phase effectively. You'll notice the suggested template is structured in this format. The following are considerations which must describe the type of groups you'd like students to work in: individual, pairs, group or whole. Be aware the most effective group size is 3 to 4. Any more than this and you run the risk of social loafing. Also consider how you group students, making sure that you vary the composition of the groups according to gender, friendship, ability and interest. Also be sure to vary whether the groups are mixed or homogeneous on these axes. Make students aware that sometimes that they get to choose groups and sometimes you'll choose them. Consider and cater for diversity in your classroom when the need arises. Find out your class list early and identify any students you need to cater for. Talk to the school counsellor, previous teachers and parents. Identify what worked and didn't work and supplement this with your own research. Colour code and make explicit in your lesson plan how you're catering for students. Making it explicit will ensure that eventually it will become implicit. When you're implementing the changes, be sure to make sure that they seem as effortless as possible. But really, you've done days of preparation work to make it all look effortless. Define the noise level during each phase. Sometimes you want students to work silently, other times they require quiet discussion, and other times you don't care. Make your expectations clear and enforce them. Some teachers have noise barometers in their classroom to help students self-regulate. A quick Google search will reveal hundreds of ideas of how teachers do this. An important aspect of a lesson plan is what you're doing, what students are doing. That is, teacher behaviour and student behaviour. So describe what you're doing and what you expect the students to be doing for each phase. These aren't to be essays, nor do they need justification, unless that's a separate task that your instructor wants you to do. Most importantly for you is that you run through the lesson in your head and brainstorm questions that you can ask to help support students, move students along, or extend thinking. Questions are the key to all learning, so learn how to ask good questions. Use Bloom's verbs in your questions. Name any collaborative strategies or graphic organisers you use. The first time you use a learning strategy or a graphic organiser, you might want to write more detailed notes on how you're going to teach students about their use. And as you become more experienced, you'll remember the sequence, so writing think, pair, share will be enough. Look for opportunities to differentiate the task for the diversity of learners in your class. Think about your activities and think about how you're going to scaffold up for extension students and down for support students. Now, I'm against teacher labelling of students with regard to ability, so I let my students decide which level of difficulty they'd like to try. I present them with the options, they self-assess their ability and their confidence with the learning task, and they choose their path. With regards to assessment, you have three types at your disposal: diagnostic, formative and summative. Be sure to clearly indicate on your lesson plan if you intend to use any of these. For example, you might use 2 questions to diagnose what students remember from a previous lesson, and then use an exit ticket, a summative task, to assess whether they had indeed achieved the learning objectives for their lesson. With regards to timing, planning according to the 5 E's means that different sections are allocated different amounts of time. The lion's share of the lesson should be dedicated to the explore phase, so scale the amount of time for the other phases accordingly. Think about using abbreviations, symbols and codes. I use a capital T for teacher and capital S, lowercase s for students. Anything I'm going to say, I put in inverted commas. Develop your own to ensure that you can plan quickly and efficiently. Use abbreviations for the learning strategies and graphic organisers, or develop icons for them. So for example, 2 overlapping circles for a Venn diagram. You might want to have students read and summarise a passage of text, so you might want to write L&D to remind you that the information is structured in that format. A big red exclamation mark can indicate an important section, or a highlighted question could indicate a question that you must ask. Write yourself a little cheat sheet so you remember what all your codes mean. Very few lesson plans you'll find on the internet describe this as a section. While you're learning the lesson plan, I suggest you make 3 things explicit in your lesson debrief: reflections, follow-up, and evaluation. Note anything you need to follow up as a result of the lesson. What was the homework? Do you need to ring any parents? Do you need to order more materials? Reflect and evaluate on the lesson. What went well? What would you improve or do differently next time? During my practicum, I used a daily journal to reflect and evaluate each lesson. It ensured that I analysed and evaluated each lesson and then set goals to improve upon for next time. This is a good habit for you to get into. It allows you to let off steam after a bad lesson, and by making it concrete and explicit, establishes this evaluation as a good habit for when you're out there teaching. Best of luck.